Hello and welcome back. I'm Chad. How about show you a few things that you can do for free. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that not all SCX24s are the same. Some things will work and some things will not. Let's just talk about some of the things that you can do for free or very cheap to make it competitive. So basically we want to talk a little bit about weight and weight distribution and change around some things and remove some things to make this even better than what it actually is. And I'm going to show you now a baseline of it on my indoor course in its most stock form, because that's a true test of how this thing's actually going to work. Okay, so we can see that it looks really cool on the indoor course. It kind of looks scale, although some of the body roll back and forth may not be because we're running friction shocks and not oil shocks. And its capabilities are limited, but I also kind of had built a pretty tough course even for probably a highly modified one, but the angles are pretty steep. You've got to have, good approach and departure angles and breakover. What are the things that we can do to help this out and make it perform better on my indoor course? So we're going to talk about getting rid of some of the weight up high. We're going to talk about approach angles. We're also going to talk about shock angles and articulation and how to make those friction shocks work just a little bit better and make it feel and look a little more realistic. Well, let's actually start with the shocks. So I'm going to take the body off because this is actually a lot easier to take a look at and work on with the body off. So we're going to remove the tires to also make it easier to work on, because we're going to get with the shocks, and the lower screws are back behind the rims and tires, so it's going to be a little difficult to get to them if we don't take them off. And when you take these off, try to keep the hub on there. Otherwise, there's a pin back there that's going to fall off, and well, they're really easy to lose. So let's not lose those, all right? So now you can see that we can get to the lower screws a lot easier, and the upper screws are pretty easy to get to without the tires on, but now we can access them really easy. So we'll go ahead and start with one of the shocks, and then I'll kind of fast forward through and I'll show you what it's like afterwards. Now I do suggest taking out at least the lower screw completely. Set those aside. Now you've got just the shock body and shaft. Go ahead and separate the body from the cap. Now you can access the shock shaft, which just pushes up from the bottom and comes right out. So then how are we going to make these more like an actual shock? What I would suggest is using one of a few different items that you may already have if you've ever had a kit before. And some may disagree with me, but I found this on friction shocks that this technique actually does work pretty well. You can take some diff lube. This one's from Associated. This one's from Team Losi. And this is another Associated black grease. These are all really, really thick and will not just run out of the bottom of the shock like shock oil would, because the shock oil is pretty viscous no matter what or how heavy that shock oil weight is, because these shocks don't seal. So you want something that's fairly thick, that's going to create some resistance within the shock body and the shock shaft to kind of help slow down the reaction time. Now we're not going to completely fill these. That's not what we want. But we want to have something in there that's going to slow down the reaction of that shock shaft within the shock body. We're going to start off with a little bit of black grease. And we're just going to put in just a very little bit. Just a little dab on that shock body, or that shock shaft, sorry. And then we'll put it back together. And as you move it up and down, you're actually going to feel just a little bit more of that resistance that's going to help slow it down, which is actually what a shock is supposed to do. There's supposed to be resistance in them. So we'll close it back up, and you're going to get some grease on the shock shaft that's exposed. That's to be expected, and if this is a technique that you want to use and keep using, then you'll probably have to add more later on down the road. And then just put it back together as you would before. Okay, now that I've got those shocks partially filled with some of the black grease that comes from Associated, we're going to set the chassis aside, and since we have the body off, we're going to address some of the weight on this to help bring some of that weight down, get that center of gravity down a ways, because cool as this looks, unfortunately there's a considerable amount of weight on top and in back, and this is opposite of where we want it. We really want the weight down low in the chassis and more toward the front. Unfortunately, this whole assembly is going to have to go. Let's go ahead and start looking into getting rid of this, and it's really easy. On the underside, there's actually just 4 screws, and the whole thing should lift right off. And now with those 4 screws removed, the other 2 are just posts that stick through the body, and now all of that weight comes off. And now you just have the Lexan body. And I might even leave the interior out, because that'll give us a little more room to work on some of the other pieces and move them around for better weight displacement. Now we might want to look at approach angle. Well, since we've already got the body off, let's go ahead and relocate the bumper a little bit to give us a little better angle going at an object. Take the bumper mounts and we're going to flip them upside down and then remount the bumper. On the front, you're going to have 2 screws on each side, one for the bumper and one for the mount, and the mount's going to go into the chassis. So we'll take the mount out first, and then a screw to hold in the bumper to the mount. Now you're not going to just remount the same mount to the same side. You're actually going to have to flip them and switch sides. So we're going to do that too. And there's a really good reason why you're going to flip these over and switch sides, is because it's actually got a little, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's got a little locator pin on one of them. And then you're going to relocate that into the side and then remount your bumper mounts. And make sure that you get them in there straight so that they go in between the frame rail, and the locator pin goes in the additional hole on the frame. And then remount the bumper. Again, just 2 screws, one on either side. And now, because you've raised up your bumper, now instead of the bumper being here, we've raised it, and now we've increased the amount of approach angle you've given to this vehicle. The one downside now is we will have to trim the body. If you want, some people have actually completely removed the bumper, but I really don't like that because then you lose some of that side-to-side strength of the frame rails. I think this is actually a better option altogether because then it gives you, it retains that lateral strength of the chassis, even though there's really not going to be that much flex because they are so light to begin with. But once you start adding weight, you're definitely going to notice when that chassis flexes, and you're going to be kind of disappointed that you didn't keep that bumper on there. So now we're going to do some upper shock relocation and see if we can get some more articulation out of it. With the shocks mounted straight up and down, it actually does limit the amount of articulation in the front and rear axles. If you slant those shocks inward toward the center, that's actually going to increase not only the articulation that you've given the chassis, but just ever so slightly a bit more ride height. Now that could be good or that could be bad. Once I show you where we're going to relocate these, then we're going to see if it's actually a good thing or a bad thing, because we'll put it back on the course and we'll see if it does any better or not. So from the stock mounting location, which is up front, almost straight above the axle, we're going to move it to the first mounting location of the ESC receiver combo mounting plate. So the first screw forward on that plate on the frame, we're going to remove that, and then we're going to put the upper shock into that location, and that will help to give us a little more articulation by leaning those shocks back a bit. So now you can see on the front that the shocks are now mounted to the frame rail instead of in this location up on top where the shock was originally mounted, which would have been straight up and down. This is going to increase the ride height slightly and also give it a lot more articulation. And once I get the tires and wheels back on, I'll show you how much we increase that by. The back's going to be a little bit different. So what we're going to do to the back is from the shock tower location, we're going to go forward to the battery tray, and the first screw just forward of the last screw on the shock tower, we're going to remove that one, and that's where we're going to remount the upper shock for its new location. Again, angling it forward and giving it just a little bit more articulation. Now the downside to this modification is this does not work for all SCX24s. Not all SCX24s have the same frame and or wheelbase. Some are shorter in front, longer in back. Some are shorter in back than the JLU I have. And a final tip with these, when you are screwing into the plastic pieces, you want to make sure that you are very, very gentle with them because you don't want to over tighten them because it will strip out that plastic and you won't have such a fun time when you try to go out and your shocks fall off. And this is what it's going to look like when they're mounted in their new shock locations. This is actually going to increase ever so slightly the articulation and give us just a bit more performance on the course. Let's go ahead and mount the body back up and we'll test fit the body again and trim the front grille area out since we've relocated the front bumper. As you can see, we're about a little more than a 1/4 inch from actually being able to close the body up. So we're gonna just take off a little bit at a time until we get that body to sit flush right where we need it. But I'm going to take a marker so I can mark the area where it needs to be cut out so that I'm actually trimming off only what I need and not more unless I absolutely need to. because I think that's going to be a good place to start. It's not too much, but it's enough to give me an idea of how much more I'm going to have to go. Try to remount it, see what we got. I'll go ahead and finish this one up, and I'll show you what we got afterwards. And then I'll hit the course and see if we made any improvements or if we made it worse. And now you can see that it fits really, really nice on there. So just had to trim just a little bit more than I thought I was going to have to. But if that helps the approach angle, I think it was worth it. Although I think maybe I might want to replace the bumper at some point with something that's a little more realistic. We'll see. See how this works first. So when putting the wheels and tires back on, when you're tightening down the nuts, don't over tighten them at all. I like to tighten them down to just a point where I get some resistance and then back it off ever so slightly. That way you're not causing any undue stress or wear on the drivetrain or the motor or any excess wasting of battery, because all of those things can have an effect by just having those a little too tight. So if you can move your wheel back and forth like that a little bit, that's where you want it. If they don't move, it's too tight. Loosen it up. Now you can tell we've increased the ride height, and I'll bet you we've increased the articulation as well. So let's get the Enduras back out, and we'll set that on top. And you can see that it's easily on top of there. Plus, we've probably gained about another 1/4 of an inch of articulation. Setting it on the edge of the tire there, we're easily still on the ground here, and we're up on the edge. So we've gained probably a 1/4 of an inch. I think that's a benefit. Now, I do miss the scale look of the overlanding part. You know, with the recovery gear and the camper top, do kind of miss that look. But for right now, we've increased the approach angle. We've raised the center up. So now our breakover angle is much better. And because we've raised the entire chassis up a little bit, now our departure angle is even better. All told, on paper, this should make a better crawler. But how's that going to translate on the course? So let the course and find out. We're not getting hung up anymore, but you can see that we're still having an issue with grip. So in a future episode, we'll be switching out the tires to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. And as you can see, we're not having any issue with approach or departure angles. Again, grip is an issue, but we knew that. So it does sound like we've got a little bit of rubbing, and that's probably on the fronts when they turn. This is further than we've ever gotten on this one in stock form, and this is just with a few minor upgrades. Still getting hung up a bit. Maybe take a little bit different line, see if we can, oh, just wanted to slide. So, but we've definitely helped out with the approach and departure angle, and so far it doesn't seem like the shock angle is giving us any other problems. And if you notice, we're not getting that springy back and forth action like we did before, since we put in a little bit of black grease to help the dampening action. Got a little hung up there on the tunnel. Realistic. So, but I think we've made some huge gains just doing the few little things that we did today. And these are things that you can do. So I think that this was definitely worth the effort and something you may want to try yourself. So breakover is a much better angle now. So we're looking really, really good. Again, like I said, this is one of the reasons why I like these little 24 scales so much, is there's so many things you can do with them, and they're just a ball. So many little free things you can do, and then with the aftermarket community that is out there, oh, first rollover. All right, well, I think that wraps it up, and we'll get back to the bench. So I think those free modifications are really going to come in handy for you guys. I'm going to cut it short because this is probably going to be kind of long because of all of the stuff I did so far. There are some other free things that I want to do in the next video, but that might require some modification and cutting. And if you're not prepared for that, well, then, you know, maybe skip that one, or at least watch it and see if you can see any benefit. So far, I think with this one at least, this was a huge benefit. I think this is going to start being pretty damn good. So, all right, thank you. Happy crawling, and we'll see you in the next video. All right. Man, I was actually impressed at how much better this did doing those few things. But now I got to figure out where it's rubbing. Where is it rubbing? I don't know. Is it? I don't know. I can't tell. Let's see. Maybe it's here. I don't know. Nope, that seems fine. Oh well, I'll figure it out. I'll let you know in the next video. See ya. Bye.